evening, everyone. My name is Brendan Hogan, Chair, welcoming you all and calling this January meeting of the Public Works Commission to order at 6:35. Just a brief note on our proceedings this evening. There is an agenda item for an appeal, at which point the role of the Board of Appeals, quasi-judicial board. In that role, we have the authority to deliberate in a private manner, so I expect we will do that, probably not vote in the public commission meeting. And I mentioned that just because I don't think we strictly need an executive session for that. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, from the attorney's office, but my understanding is we'll effectively go through the agenda, adjourn this public commission meeting, and then sort of at a prerogative by convenience, we'll meet after and separate from this as the Board of Appeals.
That's my understanding as well, and the attorney for the commission, Haley McClenahan, may be able to confirm that, yes, for us. Great. Haley has raised her hand. Okay.
Good evening. Can the board hear me?
Good evening. Yes, I can. Thanks for being here.
Hi. So if I'm able to be promoted to panelist, that would be great so that I can advise the board when we get to that portion of the hearing. Thanks for accommodating me participating remotely this evening. I think the question that I heard was whether or not this will be treated as a quasi-judicial proceeding, meaning that the board will enter into a deliberative session once the evidence and testimony portion of the matter concludes, and the answer to that would be yes. So the board will take the matter under advisement, deliberate, and then issue a written decision would be my understanding of the process.
Thank you. And just to confirm, we could do that separate and outside of the rest of our public agenda here. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. So deliberative session is separate and apart from public meetings, since the commission will be serving in its quasi-judicial function. That could occur at a time to be set by the board outside of the bounds of a public meeting.
Great.
The decision itself would be made public after parties were provided a copy.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you for that. Any further introductory comments, Director Spencer?
No, I think then the appropriate motion on the agenda, unless there are changes, would just be to strike the item number 9, the executive session, with the understanding that the board would deliberate outside this meeting.
Yeah, look forward to item 2 on the agenda itself.
Motion to approve the agenda, strike.
Motion striking item 9.
Second. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, make the amended changes to the minutes by
I'd like to request that the minutes be pulled so that we can vote on it separately from the consent agenda.
So we got a motion and a
Second.
second.
Right. It's friendly to me to. So that we can vote on it separately.
Deliberately, do we need to? So that's friendly to you?
It's friendly to me.
Is that friendly to
Yep,
the seconder as well? Well, let's say the motion has been amended to say we'll approve the agenda as posted, with the exception that we'll pull the December minutes out of consent, make that 4-1, and we'll strike the item 9 for the executive session. Yes. As you understand it to the seconder as well? Any further discussion around that? All right, we'll go to a vote. That all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Myself opposed. Our modified agenda is passed. Thank you. Item 3 on our agenda is public forum. I would welcome participants interested in speaking in public forum to come up and sign in on the sheet here. Raise your hand online as well.
Sure, Chair Hogan, we have Sharon Busher in queue, and then we can move on to the folks.
Okay, sure, yeah, let's start with the phone then.
Good evening. I can hear some of you just fine. I cannot hear the chair of this meeting at all, so I'm sort of guessing at what you're saying. So your mics are inconsistent, and I don't really know whether there's a mic button that turns them on or off, or whether some aren't functioning.
3 minutes.
So I just wanted to let you know. I mean, I heard Jim and I heard Solvi, but I couldn't really hear you. So thank you for allowing me to speak, and that's not why I wanted to speak, but I wanted to alert you to that. So I know that people use See, Click, Fix a fair amount. And so I know that the department has been informed through that manner about something that is on East Avenue. It is a depression when you're traveling south, right beyond where the stop sign is at University Road. And it is a depression that isn't all that visible. However, some cars, and it's inconsistent, there are some cars and some trucks that hit that and really bottom out. And in the summer, there's a lot of swearing going on. And in the winter, of course, the windows are up, but people swerve to avoid it, swerve into the other lane. And I don't really know what that depression is about. I do know that last summer, this odd circumstance occurred where a man in a little truck came by with a can of spray paint and put a big X on it. And I thought he maybe was working for a contractor, but he wasn't. He was a citizen running around the city labeling things with this spray paint to alert people or the Department of Public Works to problems on streets. Of course, that wore off, and I travel that street all the time. I have a Nissan Rogue, and I don't hit that depression, so it's not consistent. But I thought I would just share that with the commission and the department to see if somebody could kind of look at it and determine what is going on. I know that there are going to be improvements at that crosswalk, but I do know that it could be a hazard when people swerve to avoid it. So I just wanted to bring that to all of your attention. And the other thing I wanted to say is I really appreciate all of you and the department, and I hope 2023 is a good year for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I don't know if my mic's on or not. Close in the room, we'll hear him, Chair.
I'm sorry, what?
I just said thank you. Just curious if you could hear.
I'm not hearing you well. I'm sorry, I'm just not, but it's okay. I'll do the best I can.
Thank you for alerting us to that,
You want to put that mic-
Ms. Busher. We're going to try another microphone here for Chair Hogan.
Sure.
Close to it.
Hold on.
Okay, I can hear Chapin just fine.
Sharon, can you hear me now?
Oh, perfect.
All right, Sylvia and I will share a mic.
Okay, great.
All right. Yeah, thanks for those comments. Next, go to the room.
Okay.
Welcome.
My name's Francine Cohen. This is my husband, Steve Bliss. We were told to come here by Philip Peterson. We have issues with parking. We live on Hoover Street, and we've lived there. We moved in August 2019, and we have a garage where we park one car, and the driveway's a little short, but we've parked there for probably 2 years with no problems, and then we started getting tickets and told that we can't park there. And I know that there is an ordinance that says you can't block the road, but we're trying to figure the sidewalk. But we're trying to figure out if there's a way to come to some way that we could park there. We don't block the sidewalk completely, just a little. I sent pictures to a few people. So first I spoke to Leonard Descharme. He's parking services manager, and he said he was unable to commit to not ticketing us since it's bound by an ordinance. And then what happened is this summer, so on Hoover Street, it's a very steep street. You could park on both sides of the street except during the winter months. And then it's one side of the street. It's the north side of the street. We live on the south side. And this summer, there was a woman who was trying to have a home birth, and something happened, and the ambulance couldn't get through, and they were able to get up there. Everything was fine. But the neighbors have decided that they want to try to make it one side of the street parking all year round. Because when people park on both sides, it gets congested. So meanwhile, that's happening, and we're told that we can't park in the driveway.
With cars on both sides, it's difficult for large trucks, garbage trucks, delivery
Yeah.
trucks to get up there. And it's a dead end, so they have to maneuver back around. It's a pretty congested, tight little area.
So Leonard said he couldn't help me and referred me to Philip Peterson, who's a public works engineer, and he talked to other engineers, and he said there wasn't anything they could do. So he said to come here and talk to you guys. So that's why we're here, and we're just trying to, I don't know who makes these decisions. We want things to be safe, but we feel like us parking in the driveway. I have a Prius. It's so it's not a huge car. People could still walk around. Strollers could still walk around. We don't park there when there's snow issues with when you have to get off the street. I park in my neighbor's driveway. So we've been trying to work it out. But like this morning, it's a very steep street. We're hoping to age in place there, and it's a hardship for us to, especially in the winter, to park on the other side. And Steve this morning slipped on the black ice, and we're hoping he didn't break his wrist. Because if he parks in the garage and I could park on the side on the driveway, that's flat, and then we could get into the house. Otherwise, we're dealing with this hill. You might ask, why did we move here? But anyhow, that's a moot point.
There weren't great choices.
Sure.
I mean, it's a place we want to live. And then the other issue is our house is almost at the end of the street. So there's one more house up, and then it's the dirt road. It's Redstone Terrace. They do plow it.
Sidewalk end.
The sidewalk pretty much ends. So I asked my neighbors, I sent out email to everybody to see if anybody objected. Nobody seemed to have any issues. It's a place that people walk because they go up to the quarry. And, they can walk around, they can walk on the other side. And quite honestly, a lot of people just walk in the street, especially if you're only parking on one side.
There are sidewalks on both sides
Yeah.
of the street.
Yeah. So we are wondering
Okay.
if the city can do some kind of, I don't know what
Exception.
it's called, exception to the ordinance. We're not on a busy street. We're just, so
Sure.
that's why we're here, and
Well, we
need to
wanna-
know where to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want to understand who has the authority or jurisdiction over this type of issue, and if there is a procedure, what is the procedure for requesting whatever it is we're looking for, a waiver, we don't even know from a legal standpoint what we're asking for, except, we'd like some clarification on that.
Sure. Thank you. I'll say in this public forum tonight, we're not going to deliberate about it or
Right.
probably find a solution this minute, but thank you for coming and stating your piece. We did get the email from you. We have your contact information.
Okay. So, but are you the people that make this decision, or does it go further? Is that something you have to talk about?
Probably, I don't.
I don't know.
Judge
Yes.
Spencer, care to comment?
Yes, I think staff was referring to the commission because we are enforcing ordinance that says you cannot block the sidewalk. And so any change in ordinance would be something that the commission or the city council, depending on the section of ordinance, would need to vote on. So I think we've heard your input tonight. My staff will connect with the commission chair and we'll discuss next steps.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Okay.
And should we check back with you or should we wait to hear?
I would suggest checking back in, and I expect it would either be the commission chair or probably city engineer following up with you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room for public comment? Please.
Hello, everybody. My name is Chris Hazley. I'm here. I'll be wearing several hats tonight, both as a downtown resident, as an NPA member, and as a member of the Church Street Marketplace Commission. This is my third public meeting of the day, so hopefully make it through okay. I really wanted to talk a little bit about parking and some of the things that have gone on in the downtown. As a downtown resident, we've had a loading zone in front of our building. I live on College Street, and the loading zone in question is the one immediately in front of the Archives Bar. And for a long time, for the first few years they lived there, that was designated as a vehicle loading zone. And it was used regularly by the residents of the building, which I live, 32 units, owned by Mr. Handy, for the purposes of unloading groceries and skiing equipment and things of that. And at some point, I think about a year ago, that changed. It changed to a truck loading zone. And I didn't really notice it at first. And one of the parking service agents, I believe is the new term, educated me about the fine difference between a vehicle loading zone and a truck loading zone, and how I would need to apply for a $40 permit to make my vehicle into a truck if I wanted to continue using it. And so I just wanted to bring that to the commission's attention, because downtown is changing. Previously, that building was the Free Press building. It was a commercial building. And the way it was explained to me is that it really was always designated as a truck loading zone, and the signage was incorrect. And so when they put up the signs to designate it as a truck loading zone, really it was a technical correction to incorrect signage that had come up. So my reason for being here tonight is to just ask the commission if you guys would maybe perhaps consider a change in the ordinance to designate that as a vehicle loading zone, in recognition of the fact that we do have 32 residential units in there. People need to use that for unloading groceries and also ski equipment, hiking equipment, things of that nature. I've also learned over time that when it comes to things of parking and signs, everything is in the city ordinance. Every little change has to go through. So I figured I'd start here with you guys and y'all and go from there. So that was the first issue. The second issue is, with the parking here, putting on, the Marketplace Commissioner hat. We got a lot of projects coming down the pike that are going to have an impact on the parking downtown. When Great Streets gets underway, we're stand to lose a significant close to 40% parking. The Marketplace Garage is going to be undergoing renovations here pretty soon, and the Cherry Street entrance will be getting closed. So I think that when folks come, downtown to shop, one of the things they have an expectation of is when they pull up to the curb in the winter months is that they're going to be able to actually step out onto the sidewalk. And while we've had a very mild winter this year, we've been very fortunate in that regard. There have been storms in previous winters where the immediate part of the sidewalk would be cleared and people could get through and walk. But, if you were coming into town to shop or to do anything or even unload your car, you'd pull up next to a meter to, a 2 or 3 foot snowbank, which made it difficult to get out of the car, pay the meter, and things of that nature. And what was particularly concerning is I noticed that in the handicap spot located at the corner of Center Street and College Street, that was also the case. And I'd seen times when folks coming up with the vans were unable to extend the handicap ramp because there was a snowbank there. And I had to see them get out of the van and actually go up the middle of College Street to the intersection and then come back onto the sidewalk by way of the Marketplace as well. So I think that this is probably more of a function of, again, the changing nature of downtown and the fact that we've got some residential units. So I just wanted to bring that up there. And that's really all I wanted to say tonight on that regard. As far as the MPA thing goes, I wasn't planning to speak on this. I did see that the Winooski Avenue parking regulatory changes are on the agenda. We did get quite a bit of feedback from the community about the process surrounding that decision that was made. I think that ship has sailed, but I hope moving forward we could have a more engaging process. I think folks were feeling, based on the feedback that we got at the NPA, that there really wasn't a meaningful opportunity to participate. And I hope that moving forward we can create those kind of opportunities. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Anyone else in the room interested in speaking at public comment? Don't see any. Mr. Goulding, do we have anyone else on the phone?
You can see a few members of the public join, so if you were interested in speaking on public comment period, please use the raise your hand feature on Zoom, or the chair closes the session. And at this time, it appears that there's nobody interested in public comment.
All right. Thank you for checking. With that, we'll close public forum and move to our modified consent agenda with 2 items remaining on it: Pine Street and Cherry Street all-way stop and a King Street 30-minute parking adjustments. We have a motion from Commissioner Barr. Thank you. Second from Vice Chair O'Neill-Bavaco. Thank you for that. Is there any discussion around that motion? All right. Seeing none, go to a vote. In favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye for myself. Any opposed? Consent agenda passes 6-0. Thank you. Moving forward, item 4.1, we'll call it, on the December minutes. Do you want to say briefly why you wanted to pull it?
I made a suggestion of my own comments to be edited, but I did have some concerns of some of the other content represented by what some other folks had potentially said or not. So I'm not comfortable with the other content. So I just wanted the opportunity to be able to not approve the minutes as they are, even though I do appreciate the fact that my comments have been corrected. So that's my reason for pulling it, so that I can separately vote not to support that particular version of the minutes.
Sure. Thank you for that. With that said, I would welcome a motion on the minutes. Okay. A motion from Commissioner Barr, a second from Commissioner Fox. Thank you for that. Is there any discussion around the motion? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye for myself. Opposed?
Nay.
One opposed. All right. So the December minutes passed by a vote of 5-1. Thank you. Moving forward to item 5, agenda, an appeal relating to 194 Redrock Drive. So,
Either way.
yeah, welcome a communication from the Department of Permitting Inspections perspective. Then we'll welcome a communication from the appellants, discuss and have a chance to ask questions in our role as the appeals board. Check on public comments on it. Does that sound about right from our legal staff perspective?
So, Chair Hogan, just one thing that I would recommend would be to take sworn testimony from both city staff and from the appellant. And if the commission would prefer, I'm happy to swear in those that will be testifying before the commission this evening.
That sounds great to me. Thank you.
So it sounds as though the commission is ready to proceed with hearing from city staff. If that's the case, I'm happy to swear in Director Ward. It looks like will be presenting on behalf of the city to start.
I'm sorry to interrupt. One more point on that. I think we had a question or clarification from a fellow commissioner here.
I just wanted to note, based on our conversation earlier today, that for the record, I had a similar experience to the appellants in the past with predecessor city departments involved here. And although I do feel that I could provide a fair and impartial hearing to avoid even the appearance of partiality one way or the other, I will not be participating in the deliberations or decisions in this hearing.
All right. Thank you for that. And sorry, I passed by you earlier. Proceed.
So Director Ward, would you raise your right hand for me? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you will give to the commission relative to the cause under consideration this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
With me tonight is building official Kim Iannelli, and we also have on Zoom senior building official Brad Biggie. In the event that their testimony may be necessary, it would be helpful to potentially have them be sworn in now.
I'm happy to do so if that's the commission's pleasure.
Please.
So I'll start with the inspector in person. Can you raise your right hand for me? Do you also swear or affirm that the testimony you will give tonight relative to the cause under consideration will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And if you're able to turn on your camera, Inspector Biggie.
I'm totally trying to figure it out.
Okay.
It didn't give me an option to turn on video. So
that looks to me as though you might have the off switch on your physical camera turned
no,
off.
but I had to. They had to invite me to join as a panelist, and that just happened. There you go.
Great, we can see you now. And do you also swear or affirm that the testimony that you'll give to the commission tonight relative to the cause under consideration will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
May I begin?
Please.
So my name is Bill Ward. I'm the director of the Permitting and Inspections Department. As some minor piece of background, the city for decades issued zoning and trades permits in different departments. The zoning office for many years was up at City Hall, and in 2019, that group of staff came down to this building and became part of what's now the Department of Permitting and Inspections that I'm the director of. So the permits are issued in one location now, but that was not the case at the time that these permits were issued. The trades permits were issued by the Department of Public Works in this building, and I didn't start as the code enforcement director until 2010. So there's a minor variation in the way things were done back then versus how they're done now, but I'm answering for all of those divisions at this point. So what I'll say is the appeal is about a property at Redrock's condominium, unit number 194. The condominium is part of a larger complex, and it was formerly known as 161 Austin Drive. There were building permits issued at this specific property in 2008, this condominium, but those projects were not inspected and not closed according to the instructions that were given to the property owners when they applied for the permit. The property owners were issued a permit, building permit on March 13th of 2008. The project was for skylights and 4 exhaust vents. The project was amended a few days later on the 28th of March of 2008 to convert over the area of the garage into a yoga studio. Both of those building permits do state all work performed by the applicant shall comply with the codes and the ordinances of the city of Burlington. Both permits were signed by the property owners as the applicant. The city's permit documents have no notes from the inspectors or inspector sign-offs that close the permit. Those were included in your packet. The permit both of those permits remain open today as of this hearing. There was also an electric permit that was issued a short time after those for the same project, for the electric work that was going to happen in that area. That permit was actually issued to not the property owner, but to an electrician. That permit also is in your packet, and the permit specifically states all work performed by the applicant shall comply with the codes and the ordinance of the city of Burlington. That permit has the same sign-off requirement and call for inspections. That permit was signed by the electrician, Gordy Stone. The permit records from that are also in your packet. They contain the notes from the rough inspection, which is like the first inspection to see before things get closed in, that things are in order. And then there's notes from the final inspection that said the electrical inspector was satisfied, and that permit was then closed. The trail stops there for about 14 years. 14 years later, when the property owners called the department to get the permit closed out from 2008, Inspector Kim Iannelli from our department went to the property on December 14th of 2022. She found that the project met the building code with the exception of the window requirements, and the window requirement was a second floor. This was for a second floor area over the garage that was going to be habitable space. Now, habitable space comes into play in this because it means something specific. It's a living area, and in the general term, a habitable space can be a bedroom. So that's important to what we're going to be talking about. The inspector found that the project had a window that was too small to meet the egress requirements for the second means of egress to be able to successfully close the permit out. So from a code perspective, I gave you an overview in the packet, but generally speaking, the reason there's a second means of egress or an escape, it's somewhat interchangeable as people talk about it, is that if the primary means is blocked by a fire or some other hazard, there's another way out from what would have been either a sleeping area or area where people may be gathered or resting. In this case, it can't just be a normal size window or a smaller window. It has to be big enough for a firefighter to be able to get in and get you out of there in a safe manner. So that's called an escape window. The larger size window is important. In this case, the question of the property owner is the second floor over a garage, and there's only one door or stairway to the exit from the ground floor, and the existing window, which is too small. The property owners contacted me after Inspector Iannelli's visit, and they explained that at the time, they had a time of sale inspection from the fire marshal's office in December of 2022, and that report from the fire marshal's office did not have a requirement or state anything in writing that there was a need for a fire escape window. I read the report after they sent it to me, and I agree with them that it wasn't specifically stated. I called Assistant Fire Marshal Chris Franzen. He was the inspector who did the fire marshal's report. He told me he was aware of the open permits for the change in the area to habitable space, and he stated, quote, "I have faith that the permitting system," that he said he was aware there was open permits for changing that area to habitable space, and he said, quote, "I have faith in the permitting system, and being that permits were already open for changing this space to habitable space, it didn't raise any red flags." I have the full email from Assistant Fire Marshal Franzen to enter into the record if that's necessary. I also encourage the property owners to call the fire marshal's office specifically because it was clear that they agreed with the building official, Kim Iannelli, who had required this secondary means of escape. So there was a lack of that item in the report, but it shouldn't indicate that it wasn't a requirement. And it is Inspector Iannelli's duty and obligation to call that out. The current owners have been using this area as a yoga room, which is what the fire marshal's office saw during their December inspection. The building permit approval of that area as habitable space would allow the current and future owners to use that area as a bedroom or other living space, and this is why the escape window is critical. The property owners have told me they were not informed of the need for an egress window at the time that the building plan was reviewed and approved. And the 2008 permits do say in print that the permits need to meet the code. So it's the city's position that the property owners did know, if they didn't know what the code was, they could have asked for city guidance or sought for a professional builder's assistance for guidance. The owners also told me they were concerned that the requirement for the egress windows may not have been a code requirement in 2008. Inspector Iannelli made copies of both the 2003 NFPA section 101 code section for egress windows, along with the 2015 section to show that it's the same requirement now. That hasn't changed. And I provided copies earlier today to the property owner, and I'm happy to enter into the record a copy of those documents tonight. The owners have said that they'd had an expectation that the city should have notified them that there were open permits. But it's the city's position that the owners were notified when they signed for the permits in 2008 and that they were responsible as applicants for calling for the inspections and closing the permits. Those things are written clearly on the 2008 permits that I issued or that I gave to the commission and I sent to the property owners. In summary, I just wanted to say that the NFPA or National Fire Protection Association code section is clear, that the egress window is a requirement here. The Department of Permitting Inspections considers this a life safety issue and not a negotiable item. If we were to make an exception, I believe we would be taking on the responsibility and liability from that point forward if tragedy struck and anyone is injured or an emergency or fire in this room above the garage. This would include both the current and future owners, their guests, and potential hazards to any emergency responders. So my request for the DPW Commission is to uphold the staff decision that the Vermont Fire and Building Safety Code specific to the NFPA 101 Life Safety Code was interpreted correctly by Inspector Iannelli, and that the escape window is required for habitable space over the garage at 195 Redrock Drive. And building official Iannelli is here, and her, I would call him direct supervisor, the senior building official, Brad Biggie here, is here and assist as assistants because they both have the NFPA certification that I do not, so they can answer the technical questions, but I'd be happy to answer specific questions about my testimony now or after the appellants have had their opportunity.
Great. Thank you for that statement. I guess per our legal advice, should we proceed and get a statement from the appellant at this point?
Thank you, Chair Hogan. So just a couple of suggestions for the commission. First, I would state that if the city staff intend to enter those documents into the record that they referenced during the testimony, that the commission take copies of those and that the same be provided to the property owner. And then my next recommendation would be that before the commission turns to the property owner having an opportunity to present any testimony or evidence that they have, that they should be given a brief opportunity to inquire of the city staff a reasonable number of questions that they have regarding the testimony that was just given. If there's further testimony that is to come from the inspectors, then it would be to the commission's discretion as to whether they want to hear all of the testimony from the city staff now, give the property owners an opportunity to inquire into the testimony, and then from there move to hearing direct testimony and evidence from the property owners.
Okay, thank you. Would it still be appropriate then to, after hearing testimony from the property owners, to circle back with questions for each party, or would you recommend taking those questions one at a time?
I think it's to the commission's discretion for efficiency. It may make sense to ask questions at the end, but certainly if there are questions that come up, it's to the chair's discretion.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I'll just opt to proceed as posted on our agenda and move to hear testimony from the appellants, after which point we'll have commissioner discussion on it. Yes, Mr. Ward.
I believe I heard it, the instruction correctly, that there was a preference that we submit our documents now. That way you have them. But
yeah,
I'm happy to wait until after the appellants if you prefer.
If you have hard copies, yeah, yes, that'd be great. We'll certainly...
The appellants were given a copy by email earlier today.
Excellent.
One of us is giving you the 2003 code. They're on the bottom of the page. Right now, he's giving you the 2003. This is 2003. Let me read it on the bottom.
And just a quick point of clarification, I thought I heard a reference to some emails from the fire marshal's office, and I just want to confirm if those have been submitted to the board, if those have also been provided to the property owner. If they haven't been, I would suggest that the property owner have a chance to review those.
They have not been provided to us as property owners.
And they've not been provided to the DPW Commission.
Okay. So we do have in hand our two versions of the fire code. For that. All right, let's proceed and hear testimony from the appellants.
Hello,
Should we
my
look?
name
Hang on one second. Yeah, should we look to get you sworn in as well?
Okay.
If you could just raise your right hand up to the camera so I can see it. Thank you. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you will give tonight relative to the cause under consideration will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Annette Burbshaw, and I am co-owner of the condominium in question with Daniel Weiss. I want to give a timeline. We bought this condominium in 2007 through Champlain Housing Trust, and we qualified as low-income individuals for this unit. And these units were specifically designed with an unfinished space over the garage so that owners could finish the space if they wanted to, or leave it unfinished as storage space. And the window was in place in the facade, as it is and was with every unit in our condominium. The previous owner from whom we bought the condominium, and they had owned it since 1994 when it was built, did not finish the space. And so after we purchased the condominium, we decided that we would like to add a yoga room over the garage since we practice yoga every day. In early 2008, Danny drew up a design, and I believe you have a copy of the design in hand. And in this design specifically, the drawing shows the writing that says existing window. In other words, we created a room around the window that was already there. Zoning approved our design, and a zoning and building permit were issued. And then the work was started and also completed in the spring of 2008. Fast forward to 2020. In preparation for offering a condominium up for sale, Danny contacted Public Works by phone on several occasions and left phone messages to confirm that there were no issues or outstanding permits in our name. We never received a phone call back. In July of 2022, I went in person to City Hall to inquire if there was anything outstanding on our address in regards to the condominium. And a gentleman there took me into a side room and showed me a microfiche. And he determined that there was nothing for us to worry about. In preparation for this, in November of 2022, we signed a contract for sale of our condominium. And in the process of this, we requested a fire inspection. And Chris Franzen was an assistant fire marshal, and he was the person who came into our condominium to inspect. He walked up the stairs to the yoga room, and without prompting, he stated, "You're not using this space as a bedroom, and therefore you will not need to have an egress window." Those were his words. And we did not say anything, we did not prompt him in any way. This was the first thing he said when he saw the space. He then sent us a fire inspection report, which did not mention the need of installing a bigger new window. It is due to this series of irregularities that Danny and I are appealing the requirement to install an egress window. The high cost of the window at this point in time is prohibitive to us as low-income individuals. We were quoted about $1,500 which is a significant chunk of my paycheck as a preschool teacher. Danny is retired and on a fixed income. We would like the city to acknowledge the oversights and irregularities that I listed or mentioned above, and to waive the requirements in our specific case. In my understanding, an egress window is meant to prevent death due to fire, and the fire inspector gave us a green light in regards to this issue. Oversights occurred on both sides. Danny and I did not proceed to close the building permit, and the city did not point out the requirement of the window installation at a reasonable time, i.e. before the construction was undertaken. So it's our understanding that even if in 2008 we had proceeded towards closing the building permit, we then would at that time have been told to install an egress window, and therefore would have again had the added cost of taking out the window that was already there and putting in a different window. Whereas I feel it was the city's responsibility to tell us at the time of the design that this window does not meet the requirements, and therefore we could have, wrapped it into the entire construction project and costs, and also budgeted it. Because again, we're dealing with local individuals here. It's not that we have another 1,500 in our pocket. I believe that's the end of my statement. And I really appreciate you taking the time and giving us this opportunity to appeal.
All right, thank you for that statement. With that, I'll open up to questions from the Board of Appeals here, to either the staff members that were sworn in or to the appellants that was sworn in.
Chair Hogan?
Yeah, please.
Just one point of order. So I would recommend perhaps that before the commission move on to questions from commissioners, that it first allow the property owner an opportunity to inquire of Director Ward if they have any questions regarding his testimony, allow Director Ward to ask any questions within that scope, to respond in kind, and then open it up to commissioner questions so that the property owner is afforded an opportunity to inquire into the city staff's position and assertion here tonight. They may not have any questions, but to at least provide an opportunity, I would advise the commission.
Thank you for that. Yeah, let's do that. To the appellant, is there any questions you would like to ask of staff?
I have a statement to make in response to the opening segment, and that is Mr. Ward stated that the email communications, which weren't shared with us, with Chris Franson, indicated that because he knew that there were outstanding permits, this was the reason that he did not mention the need for the egress window. But I do doubt that, and I believe it is hearsay. Because as I said, he walked up the stairs to our room and he, out of his own free will, offered that we would not need an egress window because this wasn't used as a bedroom. And therefore, I believe that, this was an after the fact, tying up the knots to make it look a certain way. And, we just don't have any evidence to that fact, that in fact, Mr. Franzen was thinking about the building permit when he volunteered the information about the smaller window.
Any response to that from staff's end?
I'm not sure if I heard a question. I just heard that she didn't believe that what I had said was accurate, but I'm not sure I heard because it's muffled.
I also had a little trouble picking up exactly if there was a question there. I understand there's sort of a point about the opening statement and the outstanding permits that were referenced in there. If there's a specific question to staff, could you please restate that?
There was, it was a comment. It was a comment, doubting the series of events.
That said, thank you for that comment. I'll offer the chance for staff to ask any clarifying questions of the appellant.
I would like to state that unequivocally that my conversation with the fire marshal did happen. It happened the way I described it. I did ask the property owners to consider calling the fire marshal directly, and I guess I would pose that as a question if they would just confirm that I encouraged them to call the fire marshal themselves if they still had a question about that conversation.
Yeah, there is no question about the conversation. The question is about what the fire marshal was thinking. And unfortunately, none of us will ever know what he was thinking at the time.
Is there, could you answer the question though? Were you, I believe I've got the question to confirm that, were you advised to check with the fire marshal and did you do so?
We did not, and we did not feel a necessity because we didn't have a question. Or the only question we had cannot be answered because none of us will know what he was thinking at the time.
Okay, thank you. Anything further?
No, I have nothing further.
All right. Clear to proceed to commissioner questions at this point?
If that's directed to me, I think that's appropriate, yes.
Thank you. All right. Check with Commissioner Damiani. Any questions to the to staff or to the appellant?
I think my only question is, and just to make sure I'm understanding the facts correctly, that there are currently two forms of egress, and one of them, which is the window, is just not of the proper size according to the NFP standards. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
There's a way out, which is the door,
Yep.
the stairway
The stairway,
out.
yep.
And the second would be the window, which as was described is the existing window.
Yep.
And I will point out, if you look at that document, that existing window that was submitted in 2008, there aren't any measurements on there. So there was no way for the building official to say it was too big or too small. It doesn't say anything about the size of that window.
Okay.
So it would require an inspection to confirm that it meets the requirements.
May I make a comment to that?
Sure.
I would argue that it was the owners, that the city should have asked us, well, what kind of a window is this? Whoever approved the zoning would say, is this the window that meets fire escape standards? So I feel that was definitely an oversight on the part of the city.
Okay. Anything else, Commissioner Damiani?
I'm set with questions for now.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Fox.
I can't hear anything. No, I still can't hear anything. Still can't hear anything.
Wanted to try the mic.
Is that one off as well?
Does this one work?
We'll do. Yeah. See if that one's working.
That one does. That one does.
These two work, I believe.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I guess a question that came up for me was during the appellant's testimony. She mentioned that zoning had approved their design, so I guess I'm wondering if staff can confirm that for us, just for kind of that trail.
So the short answer is yes, that zoning approved the design, and I compelled to point out that zoning is the architectural appearance.
Okay.
And the building code is the life safety code, and that's why there are actually two different officials who look at it for review.
Thank you. That's all I had.
May I add something to that question or respond to that question? I also wanted to make sure everyone knew that our zoning permit for the project was closed last month.
Okay. Pass the mic down to Commissioner Barr. Questions on your?
Right there.
There it is.
All right, thanks. Just an extension of that. I mean, was the zoning permit approved when they were separate, or is it after,
The zoning permit was approved as a separate issue.
as a separate issue?
It was closed as a separate issue as well.
Okay. And did that happen after the two entities fall under you right now?
It did.
Okay, it did happen after.
It did.
So
It
that,
happened last month, in December of 2022.
okay. Well, that was one question, and I do get the idea that sometimes things, especially if you're a regular public person, you don't always see all these things, but requirements, codes, everything. But when it falls to safety, I have to say that it really does mean that something has to be done to change it, whether it can be restricting that it can never be a bedroom. I don't know if that can even be done. That it always has to be something less than a bedroom, or is that something that's possible? It has to be written into the deed, maybe?
The permit would have to be changed. The current zoning permit allows it to be habitable space, and that could be a yoga room or a playroom or a living room, a bedroom.
Yeah.
It really is a wide open door, so to speak, for future owners to be able to do whatever they want. If Inspector Iannelli had gone into that room and seen a storage area with just shelves and things like that, I think it would be clear that it's not a living space and not a bedroom. And I can't testify her, but I'm confident that an inspector would say that doesn't require an escape window because it's not a living space.
And that's as I suspected, but I just wasn't sure if that was one solution to the issue.
A permit could be amended to say that it cannot be habitable space and could be returned to the storage space. I also believe that that's not the property owner's intent. They would like it to remain a
Right.
living and habitable space.
Right, but sometimes it's this or that.
It could be reverted, however.
You can stack wood or you can clean your room. It's got to be one of those two things. And so,
Um,
right.
May I make a comment to that?
Sure.
I believe that that is the crux of the matter. It's my understanding that the discrepancy comes from the fire inspector having a different interpretation of bedroom versus living area, and the building code has them under the same heading. And I think that's my interpretation, that's where the discrepancy came into place. That as far as the fire department, it was acceptable because it's not a bedroom, but as far as the city, it's not acceptable because the standards are higher for the city.
Right.
May I ask a question? Did Assistant Fire Marshal Franzen inform you that you had open permits?
We did not talk about permits.
He didn't inform you that you had open permits?
We
So-
were already aware of it, but from a different source, which was the city.
Okay.
We were in the process of trying to close them. But we didn't discuss permits because he was there for a fire inspection. And if you look at the report, you see that there were 10 or 12 items on it, so it's not like you didn't see anything we need to change, and we have to make all those changes.
I've been working with the fire marshal's office for quite some time now, in tandem with that. And I know as a practice, if there's open permits, they let that go to our office, which is why you had Inspector Iannelli out there to close your permits, which is when the window was identified. Is that correct?
Yes, I still don't understand why he would have volunteered that, oh, this isn't a bedroom and therefore you don't need the window. Because we did not prompt him, we did not ask anything about a window, we simply walked up there behind him and he immediately made this statement.
And just for clarification for everybody, it's not contingent on being a bedroom. It's contingent on being a livable space. So a finished basement requires a second means of escape. Your door out to your hallway, down your stairs, that's your primary means of egress. Your window or a door to the outside from that room is your second means of escape. So it's two components. Sometimes it happens with a living room. Most of the time, a living room is situated in a house where you have access to a front door and a back door without passing through any other lockable doors. But basements, attics, bedrooms, living spaces, offices that are just solely independent room with a door, they require a second means of escape to the outside.
Yes, I understand that that is a requirement for the city standards.
It's a state requirement.
Yes, and state and city, and I do, because of the statement of Mr. Franzen, I suspect that the fire department has a different standard. And since we're talking about the fire, like.
I do not believe they do.
I guess that's something we could try to clarify.
Bring it back to the.
Yeah.
Here for
Yeah, let me,
further questions there.
thanks. And yeah, just to finish it out, it seems to me, just to make it as simple as possible, that the option here is to either put in the proper window if it's going to be a livable space, or revert back to storage space, and then have the permit adjusted. I think those are the two things that are on the table based on what staff's recommending. Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. At this point, I have no further questions.
All right, thank you. Pass the question, Mike. Vice Chair Levanto.
Okay. Okay, so I guess I'd like to ask the appellant, do you have any documentation of your conversation with the fire marshal when he said you don't need an egress window in your space, or is it just you are recounting what he said?
Yeah, it was just a conversation. He did not record the conversation.
Okay. And then a couple questions for city staff then. Kind of to follow what Commissioner Barr had asked, what did it mean? What does it mean for zoning to approve design? What does that mean for a resident as far as these steps go? If you can just walk us through that.
In the simplest terms, I would say that zoning tells you that it looks nice, and the trades team tells you that it's safe. But the zoning team is looking at the architecture of the building to see that it meets the design specifications that are approved under the CDO, the zoning ordinance for the city of Burlington. So if the building is allowed to be a certain height, if there are designed to be certain number of windows at specific locations, there are specific design elements that they're looking at, not the sizes of them for safety means. They are simply looking at them from whether they are approvable in their design according to the zoning, the zoning ordinance for the city of Burlington. The trades team follows on, the team that does the building permits, to confirm that the windows that were approved actually meet the life safety code. So if this were not a bedroom or a living area, then a smaller window would have been acceptable. It's really a matter of two distinct elements. It's almost like having an electrician and a plumber. They're both required for these types of, for large projects, but they're very different trades. Zoning is different than what, the elements that the building code and building officials look at.
Okay, thank you. Another question, and I hate yes/no questions, but is it the city's responsibility to inform the residents of code?
Not the specific code. The code to direct them to is to make sure that they comply with the code, and the specific elements are the types of things that it's the property owner. Since a property owner or an applicant agrees when they sign the permit to meet the elements of the code, again, as I said in my opening statement, it's our position that if they don't understand that what they just signed says they have to follow NFPA 101, they should definitely ask what that means or get a professional to help them understand what that means.
Okay, thanks. And then I think a clarification on the NFPA code, that I think there it supersedes what we think the fire marshal says. It really is the standard, and it's a state standard. There's not a different city standard for fire egress. The NFPA is the standard for fire egress, among other things. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
So we have, the city of Burlington has an MOU with the state of Vermont, and we have the most robust MOU. We have, the state has given us more authority than they've given any other municipality to perform their task within the city limits. So this is the same code that they would be enforcing in Williston or in Rutland or any other municipality. This is not a quote unquote a Burlington code. This is a state adopted code. Inspector Iannelli and myself all have the same credentials as the assistant fire marshal. Again, a long-standing operating procedure has been when they do time and sale inspection, if there's open permits, they get deferred, you know, you need to get those closed out. We don't do the building permits. That's Department of Permitting and Inspections. So he may not have called that out because of that fact, but the fact of the matter is Inspector Iannelli picked up on this, and she is 100% spot on. I fully back her judgment on this, and I would have acted in the exact same way.
So then a follow-up, because Inspector Iannelli and Inspector Biggie, you are certified by the NFPA, you can't just arbitrarily change the rules on what an egress window is. You have to follow these regulations.
Correct. That's the minimum code. If you want to exceed the minimum code, then you are well entitled to do that. But the minimum is what you have to meet for code. I believe you have all the documents in front of you that give all the specifications for what constitute an escape window for either a new construction or a replacement style window. One is 5.7 square feet, one is 5 square feet.
Okay.
So no, we don't have that ability or that authority to just make up our own things. We're following the code as it's written in black and white.
Okay. Thank you. That's all for me. Is this the?
I think this is the live mic. Thank you for that. I guess a question to the appellant. Can you clarify what you did learn, if anything, when you went to this? I guess it was the city clerk's office in July of last year.
Yeah. He did show me the microfiche, and I believe it had to do with, if there were any liens on the property and so forth. And there was nothing of the sort. And then I specifically asked, is there anything else that we need to take care of before we proceed to sale? And he said no.
Thank you for that. I'll just note, as a sort of in preparation for this hearing, I looked up the city property records, as you may know, has a nice database that's searchable of what's going on, and you can see several. I can see the 2008 permits still being open there. Yeah, unfortunately, obviously, like whoever you spoke to in the clerk's office was looking at liens or probably the history of old permits on the microfiche is may not be the latest up-to-date status of all of the electrical permits that are may or may not be completed, the zoning permits that may or may not be completed as well.
Yeah, thank you. You bring up an important issue. We were never informed by the city that documents were transferred to a digital database. Because, when this was all done in hard copy on paper in 2008. And again, I believe it's, the city should have some mechanism to let people know that have open permits that now all your stuff is transferred and you could easily access on digital. And that just wasn't the case. I learned about the platform that you have there in December of 2022. There wasn't like in 2010, oh, by the way, we're now putting everything online and you can easily access it. Again, I feel like the city fell down on informing us of the fact that even our documents were now put on the internet.
Yeah, of course, it's unfortunate that came into your awareness at the time you need permits closed. They were trying to get them closed rather promptly for closing. Can you comment on who did the construction? Did you do that work yourself?
So we oversaw it. We hired, a local carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, you're talking about low budget projects because, we don't have the finances to hire a contractor. So that's why I designed the stairs, Danny designed the windows and so forth. And, we did it as homeowners. We're lay people. And we hired professionals, and it's done in a very beautiful way. I'm sure, that whoever saw it can affirm that. It's a lovely space. And yes, but we did oversee it ourselves.
Okay, thanks. And I guess just a clarification again to staff. We've heard a few descriptions or potential descriptions used to describe this space, from a yoga studio to a bedroom to finished to habitable, versus strict uninhabitable space. And I got that Inspector Biggie clarified that the requirement is based on, you said whether it's livable space or could be habitable, but is the issue that the zoning permit is speaking in terms of what you would describe as habitable space?
Yes, in order to have the space comply, it needs the zoning approval to make what was unconditioned space prior or, unfinished space, the zoning approval to make it habitable space, and then the building permits to make it so that it's safe to meet the habitability requirements.
Gotcha. So I can, if I have a zoning permit to say I want to make something habitable, I could do my thing there, but I gather I'm not going to be able to close that permit until it meets the requirements that are attached to that.
Today. In 2008, there were separate departments issuing separate permits and closing them separately. That's not the case any longer. The departments are part of one department, and they're issued both at the same, together and are closed together.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, I appreciate checking on how long this egress window requirement has been in place. I was going to ask on that one, beat me to it. This way, nothing further from my end. Check with other Board of Appeal members here. Is there other questions that have arisen in our conversation? Okay. Can I check to our attorney's representatives? Is what you would recommend is our, do we need to take any further actions at this point for closing this item?
If there's no more testimony or evidence to be submitted to the board and the board has no more questions for either of the parties, I would recommend that the board enter into a deliberative session pursuant to 1 VSA 312E and to deliberate on the matter, and that it will issue a written decision to the parties to be made available publicly within a reasonable amount of time. I suggest 30 days, but leave that to the board's discretion.
Thank you for that. And then just to confirm, is it okay if we close item 5 on our agenda, proceed to item 6, complete the rest of our public agenda, and then take up our private deliberation separate and outside it and after this?
Yes, it can be this evening or again at a time to be determined by the commission at its convenience.
Okay. So with that, I'll thank staff and thank the appellants for both being present today and stating your respective sides here. And I will close out item 5 on our agenda. Thank you for
I
that.
have one more clarifying question.
One clarifying question,
Yes.
please.
Am I correct in believing that a building permit should not have been issued if it didn't meet the safety requirements?
Is that a question to staff, I take it?
Yes, to Mr. Biggie.
I'm not sure I understand what you're asking there.
I'm asking, we submitted our drawing and we had our zoning permit and we applied for the building permit. Why was it issued if it didn't meet the safety standards of the day?
Because the project hadn't been completed at that point. So that's why permits are issued and that's why inspections are done, to confirm compliance. The document, again, Mr. Ward, Director Ward has submitted that as evidence. It was signed, there was 2 building permits from 2008 that were signed by either you or your partner. The language on the building permit clearly states, by signing that, you are testifying that you are going to meet the requirements, the minimum requirements of the Vermont Fire and Building Safety Code, to include NFPA 101, the Life Safety Code, NFPA 1, the Fire Code, and any reference code therein. So again, permits are issued, inspections are done to confirm compliance.
So there was no time, around the issuing of the permit that there was any responsibility to inform us of the fact that our design did not meet the fire standards.
Again, we're talking 4 inspectors removed from now, but the code has not changed. The code for windows, escape windows, has not changed since at least 1976. It was fully in effect in 2008, and that standard has not changed whatsoever through today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you to staff and to the appellant again. Moving forward, item 6 on our agenda, North Winooski Ave parking regulatory changes. Welcome, communication. Director
Excellent.
Spencer.
Thank you. I've given staff the opportunity to have the night off, given that this is information-only item, so I'll be very brief. The opportunity here is to let you know that as we've understood, the commission's interest is to do a 2-step process on the many important decisions that the commission needs to make, that we wanted to come to you and explain that we are seeking to come to you next month to ask your vote on proposed regulatory changes on North Winooski Avenue that would allow for the implementation of a recommendation from the corridor study to implement bike lanes between Union Street and Riverside Avenue along North Winooski Avenue. We've been doing a number of things to mitigate the impact from the loss of space, on-street parking spaces on the east side of the street that would need to be removed, consolidating parking to the west side of the street. Those include working to develop off-street public parking options. A memo and a flyer detailing our program was included in your packet. We have also been working, going door to door with businesses to share, seek their input on how to regulate the remaining spaces, which would be what you would be voting on next month. Which spaces would be loading zones, accessible spaces, short-term parking, or long-term parking. And we have also been going door to door with the business and workforce development team in the city and offering business support through that department as well with those businesses and organizations. So we are trying to minimize the impact of these changes as we seek to carry out our planned BTV walk bike goals of an interconnected bike and pedestrian network. And just wanted to answer any questions you may have in advance of a specific proposal for regulating parking on the west side of North Winooski Avenue next month.
Great, thank you for that. Yeah, I'll open up to any commissioner questions or comments on what Director Spencer just presented. Start with Commissioner Fox. Oh, we need a functioning microphone. All right.
Oh, we got it. Pass it along.
Thank you, Director Spencer. One question I did have about the city's proposal to manage the off-street parking for businesses. It looks very attractive to me. I wish someone would manage parking for me and I get 80% of the revenue. Seems like a good deal. And I'm just curious, how staff came up with that 80-20 split, and is that 20% enough to cover, the staff time that it'll take to manage and enforce that parking?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Fox. We sought, and hearing from the council and hearing from this body, the interest to really go the extra step to try to mitigate the impacts from removing approximately 40 spaces on this 2-block section of North Winooski Avenue. So we have really delved into kind of our costs here. And by not having to install meters, by using mobile pay for these spaces, and having still the property owners maintain the lots, we believe that we can cover our costs with this small percentage and then share the lion's share of the revenue with the property owners. So, we wanted to really try to get people's attention, as the first time we went door to door with just a general shared parking pitch. There were concerns around insurance. There were concerns around how this could be managed. So we wanted to try to put something more compelling, more specific that they could respond to. We've started talking to property owners. There's 2 property owners we've talked to date. There's many more that we need to discuss this opportunity with.
Thank you for that. And one quick follow-up. You mentioned, I guess, that 2 business owners responded. Has that response been positive, neutral? And
the 2 to date have been wanting to know more. I think they both have varying concerns. We did confirm with zoning, one of the key questions was, would renting out spaces on a particular parcel for people who were from an adjacent parcel, would that set up any zoning approvals? But thanks to recent council action on parking policy reform, no zoning permit is needed for this operation, with one important caveat that this has to be an ancillary use to a primary use on the property. In other words, the zoning code in this part of town seeks to prevent surface lots from being a primary use, surface parking, and that there needs to be a primary use on the property other than surface lot parking in order to take advantage of this shared parking opportunity.
thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. And thanks, Director Spencer, for that good synopsis. I had read through this, and at this point, I support this. Where will the parking be? I mean, I'm looking at the map, and it doesn't necessarily say where it will be. It'll be in a variety of different places adjacent to where it's being removed.
It will be wherever any property owner agrees to open up their lot for public parking at times for them that are off-peak. So at this point, we don't have any off-street parking secured. This is merely kind of a template in which we hope to secure support as we go door to door. It's important to note that none of the on-street parking changes south of Union Street, south of the feeding Chittenden, that the cross-section of the street is staying the same. It was part of the compromise when we brought forward the corridor study to implement phases in order to limit the impact while still getting full north-south bike lane connectivity.
It's exciting to see this move forward, so thank you.
Yep.
That's all I have.
Vice Chair O'Neill Blanco.
Okay. What about TDM? Is this part of your engagement process with businesses? Yeah.
Yes, we had the TDM grant program that was offered where the city offered opportunities to apply for grants totaling up to $15,000. Those grants were allocated and distributed early this year. So the Community Health Center of Burlington received a $3,000 grant to support in their work with CAPMA around surveying their employees. A retail establishment secured funding, or actually separate from a retail establishment, a nonprofit secured shopping carts that they are going to offer to businesses along the corridor to help their walking customers. So each business kind of applied for different things. Some applied for bike racks that we're providing at no cost. So there is an element of that. There will need to be ongoing elements, and we have asked CAPMA, the Champlain Area Transportation Management Association, they've rebranded a couple of years ago, to apply for funds that they have sought that may enable us to provide a more ongoing TDM approach along the corridor. The city is not funded or in a position right now to offer ongoing TDM services without CAPMA's kind of funding resource that they are pursuing.
Right, but they're a great resource. Go
Yep.
Vermont too.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think the community health center is that like an interesting nut to crack on kind of on Riverside and the parking there. And I wonder, and this may be totally going off the rails here, but you know how the community health center sits on that plot? It's like intersection, but then it kind of goes down, like at the back, kind of goes down to the intervale. Is there any parking that could be utilized? I don't know what the businesses are. I know there's like a mattress place if you go down to the intervale. But just looking at some of the surface maps, there's like a car park or part of a car park that's on that bottom layer. And there's like a Rambo trail, but I don't know if, investments in, and I don't know who owns that, right of way, all that. But just if we're going to kind of blow the doors off of how we're thinking about parking, also looking into that adjacent space might be interesting. I'm clearly not an engineer, so he's not even listening. But on more things that I'm interested in, the parking regulations, and I know you mentioned you're doing outreach, but I know on that block before you get to Riverside, kind of Archibald to Riverside, some of those you could just kind of park all day long, and I think so that invites maybe some community health workers or people who are working in that corridor to just park there without having to utilize other spaces. So that kind of nice mix of being able to have some term parking, but the turnover as well.
Yeah.
Streetscape improvements. I don't know if that's part of the corridor plan as well, in addition to the bike
In the
lanes.
longer term, not in the
Longer
short term.
Okay. And then last thing is really about the outreach and engagement piece. If we've heard from just two, is the outreach, here's a flyer, you email me, or are we really, as a department, trying to go door to door and meet folks where they are, and also recognizes that some of the businesses, there are, I think, a couple, they deal with some vulnerable populations, and making sure that we are really meeting them where they are, as much as possible.
Yes, all good comments. So to hit the last one first, we are spending the time going door to door to have conversations, not to just drop flyers.
Okay.
And we're going door to door with other partners. We have gone with city councilors. Both Councilor Bergman as well as Councilor Barlow have joined us on the door to door, and the Business and Workforce Development Department in the city. Will Clavel and other staff are going door to door with us to offer business support services, microloans, other opportunities. So we're trying to have as many substantive one-on-one conversations as possible. The short-term improvements are necessitated by the timeline for the paving, for the state's paving of the corridor. So there aren't major changes in the corridor other than the lane reassignment as part of the project. But the long-term corridor study does talk about more robust streetscape design, moving curb, bulb outs at intersections, those types of things as well.
Great, that's all.
And we are working with the Community Health Center of Burlington to explore off-street parking options. I want to just thank them for working with us to reach out to Charlebois, which is property owner to the east of them, and then Queen City Steel to the north of them, to explore options with those two property owners as well. They aren't going to be easy solutions, as you identified. There are grade challenges, but Norm's engineering team has offered assistance with some conceptual design planning if they want our help with that to date. They have used their own experts.
It's great minds.
So, yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Damiani.
Sure. Do we have a count of the sort of potential number of spaces that are along this particular study corridor of private spaces that have the potential to sort of be part of this program?
There was a survey of just all private parking in the area, an estimate of it. There's 40 spaces that are going to be impacted here on the east side on this 2-block area. We have secured, Burlington Housing Authority has offered 6 spaces to be leased to the Community Health Center of Burlington. There are parking lots far in excess of 40 additional spaces. Key large parking lots include the Bus Barn development owned by Champlain Housing Trust, the Vermont Legal Aid owned by Champlain Housing Trust, 294 North Winooski, which is Burley Axe and CCTV. They have a large parking lot. The Children's Space, Outright Vermont property has a decently large parking space lot. Those are the main property owners that we're reaching out to at this time.
Okay. And then in terms of timing, I think it said that this was scheduled for this summer to be repaved and restriped.
Yep.
Is I guess the February meeting when the commission is going to be discussing these changes, is that sort of the last possible moment, or is there additional breathing room from there?
Right. From the direction we've heard from the state is that they want our direction and final decision and ordinance in place by March, so that the final striping plans can be given to them and to their paving contractor. The key element here is that as you know, when you approve an ordinance change, there's a warning period and appeal period. So it would be in everybody's best interest if we can get to an agreement in February so that that kind of 1 month appeal period could run out by the time we need to tell the state what the regulations and therefore the striping plan would need to be.
Great, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Overby.
All right. The questions that I have really relate to the fact that we have this sort of need for a mix of people who store their vehicles and then the people that actually use businesses in the area or come to the area in order to be an employee in the area or get services in the area. So I know this. You just recited quite a few of those very large parking lots that are available with lots of space, and the challenge I think you've had of trying to figure out how best to make it possible for those spaces, 40 spaces, to be somehow made available for either of those choices, a in and out because somebody's going to a restaurant or going to a store, or they're stopping for a medical appointment, or my thought is that you're on the right track with this, particularly proposing that you do the city plan to manage some of that parking and take the scariness out of it. And it reminds me of the proposal years ago that we had approved for doing the very same thing downtown. You had analyzed all the parking lots, private lots, and we're going to come up with the same exact sort of thing. And until we had a private parking company step in and somewhat cherry pick the opportunity that we had. So one of the questions I had relates to, and you answered the question about the community health center, because I think their employees are one of the big loads on the street. And we changed the parking on the east side of North Winooski from 3-hour parking to facilitate use of, turnover for the people that are using the restaurants and the laundromat and things like that, to open season. So we sort of created an expectation of that. So I'm happy to see that they're willing to work with finding places for their employees to park, and that maybe some of these plans we have are going to help. But one of the questions I did have is, in your conversations with people, the private lot owners, did you see any preference that they were expressing for using the kiosk type method or permits for the storage of cars method needing? That's one thing, which would be a permit for somebody like a tag, like we have in a residential. But for the people that are going to the restaurant, say on North Winooski there, a different need and a different technique. Did you find any kind of sense of willingness to use one or the other of those kind of things? Because if you could get 40 cars off the street that are just being stored there because people leave their car there to go skiing, but they actually work in town and they walk and bike everywhere, that's one kind of way to deal with this. Or
right.
40 cars, that leaves the space for people to be able to be the in and out type of a parking person.
I think there's very few parking lots along the corridor that aren't fully subscribed at some time. So I think there's very limited appetite among property owners to explore long-term parking. Most of it is, hey, we're mostly 9 to 5, Monday through Friday operation. We're open to nights and weekends, or, something to that effect. Parking is pretty heavily subscribed in that corridor, as there's been lots of reinvestment on that corridor, thanks to Champlain Housing Trust and many others. So I will say that the only thing we can really do at scale and at this cost really is mobile pay, which can handle either monthly permits or temporary stays. So I think it works for either option. We just can't afford to install kiosks and maintain kiosks for sharing most of the revenue with the property owners.
Right. Okay. So it would not be. It would just be the sign that says, if you're parked here, use this method, put your license plate in, Parkmobile, the same thing that you would do.
Right. Or
anywhere
it could
else.
just say monthly parking only. You must enter your code to start a parking session, and people who have a monthly permit would know they have to enter their monthly code to start
Mhm.
their parking session.
So that the bigger picture that needs to be addressed as parking management is really the need for somewhere satellite parking for people that do store their vehicles. Because I think years ago we did a study on Buell Street, and there was like 25% of the cars there sat there for forever. And so I don't know how many of those are, again, ones that are in the way that are really taking up space that we need for the people that are going to be coming and going through the day, through the day. So I think that addresses my questions. I know there's a lot of concern about the process, that, to notify people and change things. And, and frankly, I've participated in quite a few of the meetings online, and so I'm sort of surprised at that, that sense of lack of process, because there were quite a few meetings, and with that parking management committee, and so I'm just surprised. So I don't have the same sense of that, but that's just me because of the meetings that I attended. And I also noticed that it's interesting too that one of the big concerns is the employees of social service providers that are in the neighborhood. And the reason that their businesses are there is because that's where the population is that can walk to them. So it's an interesting conundrum that there's the need for parking for people that are not living in the neighborhood that want to provide services to people that do live in the neighborhood. So as a person who lives in the Old North End and uses that corridor and walks, I'd like to see the ability for people that are businesses there to be able to have places to park. But I also am a little bit concerned if there's a demand for no bicycle lane so that social service agency staff can drive in and park to do their good work in the community. I'd rather be able to have a bike lane for the people that live there and less traffic and people be able to walk. And I want to make sure that we have a way that people that need to work there recognize that the community needs certain things, and we do want to find a way, so it's a little bit of an odd conundrum. I would love to have those people just move into the neighborhood and not have to drive, but that's not anything that we can do anything about. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Just a question on the scope of the outreach here, just for general support, and specifically on the recruitment of businesses for this managed parking plan. We've got it in the packet, the yellow stripe on the map of the scope of the proposed on-street parking adjustments. And I'm curious, are you making the round sort of neighborhood wide in adjacent streets, or upstream, or out sort of above and below that stripe, or are we just talking to people on the avenue within the project space itself?
Yes, we are trying to reach people on side streets as well, because we know that some of the highly subscribed parking is on the adjacent streets, such as Riverside Avenue, proximate to CHCB. So we are trying to engage those side streets, and it's likely that our recommendations coming to you next month will include some parking changes on those side streets immediately adjacent to North Winooski.
That sounds very reasonable for my end.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. No further questions on my end. We check and see if there's anyone interested in speaking at a public comment session on this item.
Not online.
Okay. Anyone in the room? Yeah. Mr. Haley?
Yeah. Well, this was not part of the plan tonight, but since I'm here and I have a little familiarity with it, being on the MPA, I try to convey as accurately as I can the sentiments that were shared there. My takeaway, recollection rather, it was that we last heard about this proposal at the NPA back in close to a year ago, I think February perhaps. It's been a bit. But that one of the solutions proposed was to use the additional capacities on the lots provided by the private private property owners. And it sounded like, based on what you guys were saying and what I had understood as well, is that the capacity there was limited, and the concerns that we heard were, as you I think surmised, that we heard from the community health center, we heard from residents, about the loss of the parking there and how it would affect the neighborhood given that there. I'm encouraged that you guys are that the Department of Public Works rather is out trying to do some door to door to alleviate this. I know it's a tough row to hoe, but recognizing that this is going to be on the agenda, it sounds like next month. I think I would try to remind our friends at the NPA that maybe the folks that are most affected would want to avail themselves of the opportunity to speak on this issue. I live in the downtown part of Ward 3, so it's not an immediate concern, but it is part of my ward, so I do try to look out for those folks as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that.
We have, and thank you for those. The one pager here is available for you and to be circulated. We have let folks know in our flyering around the parking changes about when the commission meeting would be in February. So they're already noticed of that even before we have a draft recommendation that we will also circulate to the neighborhood in the coming weeks once we have that based on the input we receive.
Great. Thank you for that. Mr. Golding, can we do one last check of the phone here? Anyone?
Yeah, there's no one signed up.
All right. I think we are in the clear then to close item 6 and proceed to item 7 on the agenda, the director's report.
Great. Mr. Goulding, I don't know if you have interest in doing a bike share update or whether you want me to do the bike share update.
I'll let you take the reins
Okay,
on this.
great. I just want to thank Mr. Goulding and others on staff who filled in during having vacancies of our transportation planning team. I'm really excited to announce we have 2 new planners who have now started. We were going to have them come tonight, but with the first appeal, we didn't know how long that was going to run, so we'll bring them next month. But bike share is moving along. As you heard last year, the bike share entity had gone out of business that we were working with, Bolt. And as a result, we've worked together with our regional partners, puts an RFP out to bid, thanks to the leadership of CATMA. And the bids are due January 27th. And it's important to note that as we project with the actions that need to be taken, most actions will be at the council level, not the commission level. They'll need to approve the MOU with all the partners, UVM, Champlain, South Burlington, Winooski, and CATMA. And any kind of agreements that are encumbrances or licenses to use parks would go to the city council as well as their property rights. So it's unlikely that this commission will see action, but I wanted to keep you informed. GMT, I outlined the budget process in my director's report. The board did approve, I believe unanimously, the FY24 budget that also had us reinstating fares and reducing service 3%. It was a challenging budget to put together. I think it was helpful. We had a great turnout at the public forum. I really want to thank staff for getting the word out remarkably well. But we're in a difficult spot trying to change the financing structure for public transit in Vermont. So I brought forward a resolution that approved the budget on a couple of conditions, including prioritizing a regional and statewide funding campaign to get more funding into GMT other than relying on the local property tax, which we know is a very limited and constrained source. So thanks to Councilor Bergman for advocating a lot of this funding effort. And I think last but not least, Thank you. Chair Hogan had asked about the wastewater plant tertiary treatment pilot that you all got to visit the last fall. And we hope to have the report back in the next month or two, and we'll put it on the agenda The consultant on that project is waiting for one final company to report their numbers in so that we can bring a robust report to you all. So that's the report. Thanks.
Great, thank you. With that, I'll move to item 8 on our agenda, Commissioner Communications. Start down this end with the functioning microphone, Commissioner Damiani.
I have no comments tonight.
All right. Commissioner Overby.
My comments are just relating to the director's report. I had a quick question. Are there just bikes being considered, or bikes and scooters in the electric, the new contract, bike share?
Yeah, the general interest at this point is to focus on bikes. As with the last contract, there was an opportunity for a pilot for scooters, but to focus on bikes.
Okay. Not that I'm advocating for scooters, I just was curious.
Yeah.
And on the GMT budget, are there statistics like publicly available that are, that tell the ridership during the fare-free years? Like somewhere that we could see, because I'm just curious whether or not the fare-free made a difference at certain times of the day or at all. And is that something that that are on a GMT website, or how would one find that?
Yes, ridership overall is still down from pre-pandemic levels, even with the fare free. That said, we did get a good report and analysis from GMT's consultant on the potential long-term benefits of fare free. So I'm happy to share that. They looked at the cost per additional ride of that subsidy. And interestingly, the estimates were generally in line with the cost per passenger that exists currently. It's around $5 per ride. So it is not apparently a huge win to remain fare free, and it's not without cost. The board, without having a sustainable funding source to generate local dollars to match all the state and federal dollars, felt like we had to reinstate fares. But I'm more than happy to share the analysis with you, and it doesn't mean we can't advocate in the future. A number of regional rural transit districts in the state do operate on a fare-free basis, but they have much smaller operations and stronger state and federal support as a percentage of their operations.
But what you're saying is that the ridership did not increase from pre-pandemic, where we were paying for the bus, to now, where we've been getting the free bus ride. So,
right.
So which is counterintuitive, but it's interesting that you have that information.
Yes.
Because you would have thought that we would have had more ridership if the fare was free. You would have thought that. But I have been concerned over time, and this is something that has nothing to do with the fare free or not fare free. Mm-hmm. It has to do with the fact that we don't market the buses for people that have vehicles. They are marketed for students, they're marketed for elderly people, they're marketed for people that don't own cars and can't afford cars. And so there's the proof that the ridership did not change really requires some thought. What that message is. And I think one of the big problems is that we don't market properly bus usage for the general public of people that own vehicles. And I've had that concern for years. So it could get caught up in the discussion about fare free, not fare free, but if in fact no change happened to get people on the bus that were, that own vehicles and could drive because the fare is free, that's a bad thing. That's a bad sign. So we got to really do something, and I don't know what it is, but that's a problem. One of the separate question relates to the cost. Is it possible for GMT to have some smaller vehicles that once they know the demand load at certain times of the day, they could switch to a vehicle that's not as costly, and it relates to, because I think I ride the bus, and when the people get on and off, they were clicking so they're keeping some sort of count of people fare-free riding that they couldn't get by paying. with, the cards. So I really want to do better in Burlington with public transit and the GMT buses. I don't know how to help make that happen. I really do, but I feel like something isn't and we didn't take advantage of the opportunity we had over the pandemic with fare free. And so maybe we can do something between now and when it actually goes away. Because it sounds like we're not going to lose ridership. We're going to just keep the same, even if people have to pay, which is pretty sad. So anyway, that's my rant. But I do want to support public transit and bus riding, and I think we just aren't doing a good job of marketing that to the average middle class person who owns a vehicle. Thanks.
Yeah. The world has changed very dramatically during COVID. The biggest hits were to our commuter buses. We stood up commuter buses. We launched a very successful service of Link Express all over the state, and it completely evaporated overnight. So we are trying. We've got a great new general manager. I think we've got a great staff. But without a sustainable funding system that can deliver 15-minute headways, that can offer choice riders a real opportunity, I think we've got a very long road to hoe.
Vice Chair O'Neill.
Well, if parking's cheap, then it's easier to drive. And I think the pandemic, about, GMT, I love public transit. The challenges during the pandemic, again, because of commuter drivers, because of hybrid school. I mean, I'm just thinking of like people who just ride regularly, didn't have to.
Yeah.
Furthermore, there were people who chose not to ride the bus to allow space, at least at the beginning, for those frontline workers who needed to ride the bus. So it remains to be seen. We have a broken system on funding public transit in the United States. So I don't think our little commission can fix this, but I just I love this idea that you mentioned about getting kind of. I have it in my head of like getting the rallying troops to really get some of our partner communities to also contribute a fair share. Can't always fall on the shoulders of taxpayer property owners in Burlington. But anyway, that was a different soapbox. All I wanted to say really was I love the new extra large toters for recycling. I had mine delivered, and I see the truck coming and going and delivering in the neighborhood. It's great. I also still see a bunch of the buckets. I know we have until May, but great job. It was quick. It was easy. Pay online, and you get your toter delivered. And I just think, like, when I look and see the recycling trucks, and I just think we are helping our workers not have shoulder injuries.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Shabar.
There hasn't been a lot of snow, so great job clearing all the streets and the sidewalks. No, I actually, even when there is just a little bit of snow, it's nice to see the plows, sidewalk, and so forth. I haven't seen anybody slip on my street going up the. I will say that all those really nice plastic bollards, either the snow plows took them out or people took them out, because they're pretty much all gone at the head of the street. And I did a C-click fix, and I know it's not going to be fixed until probably after the snow stops.
That's correct.
But I like the improvements that I've seen, so keep it up.
We want to plow more snow too.
Yes, I will echo Commissioner Barr's sentiment about the sidewalk plows. I have profound gratitude for this department for doing that. I think it's something that a lot of people don't appreciate that the city does. And so thank you. Please continue doing it. I'll also say, like, along with winter, the paint that stripes our bike lanes is gone in a lot of places. So just another plug for, protected separate infrastructure that is not just paint. And lastly, Director Spencer, I'm super grateful to hear about that motion you're putting forward at the GMT board meeting. I think a lot of people feel very deeply that public transit is an important resource. So thank you for kind of being a leader on that. And Commissioner Overby, as Director Spencer mentioned, GMT did a really good public meeting on their budget and what it included. The staff did a really good job answering questions, and if you're curious about sort of their budget and what's going into those decisions, I might encourage you to look at that presentation. It was really good. GMT's, and it's totally tough. And so one thing that John Moore said at that meeting was that if you feel that fare free transit is a benefit to your community, you know, as a public citizen, you got to tell your representative about it. And so I think as members of the public, that's something we can do, is push our elected officials on it as much as we can. It behooves all of us to do so. So yeah, I know it's hard and it's a challenge, but I don't know, I'm an optimist. So that's all. Thank you.
All right. On the GNT thing, while I'm thinking about it, I mean, I think obviously the switch to fare free did not happen in a vacuum. It's extenuating situations and changes in people's patterns the past couple of years. I mean, separate from there, I think research in other communities has shown that fare free transit tends to get mode shift from people walking more so than people driving. Just by nature of maybe the people that are taking trips by those modes in the first place. So I think even in an ideal world with pre-pandemic travel patterns and rock star marketing budgets and everything, I don't think we would have should have expected great mode shift from that alone. That certainly we need, and I guess, but I'll just one more point on that is, to the extent possible, I know it seems like folks in this room are in support of GMT getting resources. I think it's especially crucial that there's enough service, enough quality service to avoid the further ridership death spirals in the future, because we don't fund it enough to have buses running frequently enough to have it be a usable surface, which means that there's less bus fans to be the advocates for even more service the next time around. And I have, to Commissioner Fox's point, had now prior interactions with state reps say that, like, yeah, we know we need to fund it, but the bus doesn't work for anyone. And I'm like, yeah, it doesn't. It's going to work for even fewer people if we continue to shortchange it. So we got to treat it as a public service and fund it accordingly. Anyways, had my water meter replaced recently. Was alerted by a nice letter in the mail that it had not been transmitting a signal in a couple months. But props to the team that came out and swapped it. I think the gentleman's name was Jacob. Courteous, punctual, professional. So, had a nice experience with the water services team, and get a shiny new meter that's hopefully transmitting my data for. I have been getting billed. I think I got my letter said that I would sort of get billed at a prorated estimated level in the meantime, and then they'll square it up once we're back transmitting water usage again.
Don't put the ice rink in the back.
Yeah. Exactly. I was pleased to see a crew out salting a troublesome sidewalk spot on Union, in the South Union, in the vicinity of about 204. And it's a spot that I brought up in this forum in the past as a persistently troublesome wet spot where whatever's happening on that private residence makes a mess of our public right of way on the sidewalk year round. It's wet in the summer, it's a thick, icy mess in the winter. So while I appreciate the that we're throwing salt on it, to some extent that feels like a fool's errand, and we gotta circle back and do some investigating on that. I don't know what, legally I know we have these issues of our authority and scope and stuff, but there's certainly property owners can be got to be held accountable if they're making a mess of our public stuff, even inadvertently. Had a good exchange with staff around parking ordinances and how they're represented and the relative usability of how they're represented in the ordinance. Just to say, challenging. Every time this comes up, I go, if we have a proposed change, I go sort of looking to see what's around in the vicinity. And it always takes me way longer than I feel it should, because it's very discontinuous. There's no, if we're talking King Street, there's no sort of intelligible way to say, tell me what's going on in the area of King Street. And you're sort of scrolling. You can search for King Street. It shows up 88 times in that section, right? But if you scroll down to one and it's item 300 in that like subsection, I've lost the header. I don't know if I'm in the 10-hour subsection or the 3-hour subsection. So anyways, I think it would be cool to have that, a more usable interface for that one way or another. And that would be probably a separate layer outside the code publishing platform. But I could envision, I don't know what the market is for this aside from us. I imagine it would save staff time and headaches, the folks that are preparing these changes, in addition to just saving me and my fellow commissioners headaches when we go to look up and try to see what's going on. But I imagine like that could be the underpinnings of some nice other public services on the order of, suppose I'm trying to get to this business. What are the options in that vicinity? Can I see that, there's 3-hour spaces and 2 30-minute spaces around, or like, what are the options if I need to pick a kid up at school? What are the options in that vicinity? So having some sort of more friendly queryable thing would be not a trivial project, but a worthy one if we could get some interns or contractors signed up for it. And I think that's all I got. Thank you for that. Do you have final remarks?
Well, I just wanted to say that I got the vibe that people think my comments about GMT were critical of them. Okay, because that was absolutely not my intent. Okay, good enough. Because I have been so impressed with the punctuality. The buses are there and leave right on the hour, right on the half hour. The drivers are fantastic. It is fantastic. I am just wanting to support an expansion of what I think you call the choice riders. The choice riders, is that the term you're using for people that don't require a bus but would prefer to use it to be on a public transportation? So I absolutely support everything, and I just want to be supportive of expanding the ridership with choice, those choice riders. So I'm glad to hear it wasn't looking like I was slamming GMT for some reason. Okay, because it was absolutely not the message I was trying to provide. Thanks.
It's noted. Thank you. All right. Anything further from commissioners? All right. With that, we'll close commissioner communications and go to the next item on our modified agenda, which is adjournment and next meeting date, February 15th. We have a motion from Commissioner Barr.
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Damiani. Excellent. Is there any discussion around that motion? Go to a vote then, please. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. We are adjourned at 8:44. Thank you all.